Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Killteam 40k podcast, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan and I'm joined by the Sylvester Salone to my Carl Urban, Connor. How you doing this evening, Connor?
Can I just confirm, is that an Arbites Judge Dredd reference going on?
It is the Arbites Judge Dredd reference, and I'm sticking down that I think Carl Urban was the better performance in the more recent Dredd act, but that might be controversial.
No, I agree. I think, yeah. Well, it's good to see you back in Blighty, if I'm honest, because you've been off sunning yourself on a jolly over in the States enjoying the LVO. Did you want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a work trip, so I didn't actually get to participate.
Yeah,
there was some work, some drinking. Obviously, it was Las Vegas, City of Sin, whatever. So, but it was good. Yeah. So I managed to pop into LVO on the Sunday and see the final few rounds, which was really quite cool and quite interesting, and met some of the US players out there. So it was good to get out there, see what the tournament's like, and hopefully, fingers crossed, next year I might let's get across and play myself rather than just go and spectate. But it was definitely cool, and they have a very different style of maps than what we have over here in the UK. So all the terrain, rather than being like Games Workshop terrain, is made and produced by Luster's Workshop, which is run by a guy called Dakota. And he's basically made this bespoke terrain specifically for the Killteam scene. And I think the year before, they got quite a lot of criticism for their terrain, but this year it seems to be much more improved. So that's the main thing, I guess, is that they've got a set, it's working, and they've got a whole bunch of maps and all that sort of stuff that are going with it. So a really interesting scene, and a lot of data comes out of it. So that was pretty cool to see.
Is the terrain similar to like Morocco and Chalnath that we've seen in UK tournaments, or is it completely different, completely new?
So I would say it really depends on the match, like the map itself. So a lot of the terrain, I think, has like a set layout, and the objectives moved underneath, or deployments moved. So I noticed on some of them, it was quite favourable for shooting teams with quite open sort of deployment zones and angles and that sort of stuff. So you could, if you're a shooting team, you could potentially punish your opponent really quite early on. And then on other ones, they'll be really like dense and heavy terrain. So it'd be really favourable for melee teams. So it was hard to get a without playing it myself on a lot of the maps, it was hard to get a good judgment on it necessarily. But I know they use a lot of visibility blocking as well. So it was definitely interesting. It's very different to what we play over here in the UK with our sort of standard terrain. But it was definitely different, and it favoured a whole bunch of different archetypes based on which map and mission you're on. So I don't think there was a team that was particularly dominating as a result of it or anything like that, but it's definitely different to what we've seen. But that was pretty cool. There's actually one thing I would sort of pull out from the LVO. I know a lot of people probably have seen the top 8, and there's not really too many surprises there in the teams that you see represented, or the players either, actually. So Gellerpox coming out on top is, I wouldn't say surprising, as the player running them, Orion, is renowned at being potentially one of the best players in the world, and having run that team a lot himself before. Again, the fact that he's done well with it is not surprising. But there is one anomaly that I think is worth focusing on, because I think actually there is some learning there, and it'd be interesting to see what people think about it. But the team that I want to talk about is actually, I think it was 11th place, was a Kasarkin player.
Wow.
Yeah, and so now 11th place Kasarkin, you think to yourself, okay, well, fine, he managed to get into the top, wherever it is, like 25%, whatever. But actually, it's the fact that the only 2 losses he had was to the number 2 player running Pathfinders and the number 4 player running Wormblade. Now, I rate both of those teams much. Personally, I rate them much higher than I do Kasarkin.
Well, we rated them at A tier, I think, and Kasarkin at D tier. So yeah,
exactly right. So and I think Kasarkin are definitely lacking in some areas. So potentially there's an element there. Like I said, some maps are quite favourable for shooting teams, and so maybe that was part of it. But the point that I wanted to bring out there is I think it's really interesting to look at how player skill can affect the placement of a team, because I didn't rate them very well, but yet Brett, the guy that was running them, managed to do some quite good success with them. So it was interesting. I sort of thought I would ask him a bunch of questions and see if we can draw out some lessons, because maybe we're just playing Kasarkin wrong, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can learn from that to see how we how he was so successful in so many games, going 5-2, and only losing to those two much stronger factions, in my opinion, and at the top table. So that's kind of what I wanted to look at, because had he won his last game, he would have finished fourth, which I think would have been quite a big shake up to the meta if it happened. So
I think 11th is a big shake up. Could you imagine fourth? Bloody hell.
exactly, yeah. So I asked him, why did he choose to run Kasarkin? And previously he'd been running Warp Coven, which obviously is quite a complex team, and again, I don't think one of the strongest. But he's just sort of said that they thought they were a fun team to play. I don't think he thought it was going to be like a stomping team or anything like that, but he just thought they had interesting mechanics and that sort of thing, and enjoyed their elite dice system. So I was trying to figure out, is there something that we as the competitive community think that we've missed or something like that? And sort of his take on it was, he thinks that they've got some of the best shooting in the game, and it's the elite dice mechanic that I think is going to do that. So and I've heard this sort of said before, the elite dice, it can't save a terrible roll. Like, if you roll 4 1s, it's not going to make any better. But what it can do is it can make an average roll into a good roll, and a good roll into an excellent roll. And so when he was bringing so many sources of high AP, high damage weapons, being able to turn that from, as I said, like an average roll to a good roll, or a good roll into an excellent roll, can then really make the difference. So that was an interesting take, and I guess from that the point being is, like, let's say you're playing against Space Marines, or in session, or Legionary, being able to force through crit say or get extra damage and activate their abilities is pretty good. So the question I sort of then wanted to go on to is, like, why did he lose, right? So, like, there was 2 games which he lost and a bunch of games that he won, and I think there's much more to learn from looking at games that people lose rather than games that you win, right? So the first game he lost was against Pathfinders, and the second game was Wormblade. So in both those instances, his team was out activated. So again, I think there's definitely something to be said about activation advantage, and just it's inherently a very strong thing to be able to make sure that you can go last and be able to have the ability to determine the flow of the battle. And I think the other point that he sort of touched on was the ability to play objectives as well. When your team's so fragile, he was losing models too early, and therefore potentially wasn't able to play the long game. So I guess that's kind of the 2 points, and we, I guess, highlight that before with the Kasarkin team is, you're only 10 models and they're quite fragile, and then quite quickly you can run out of that steam should you take casualties. So that was interesting to see as well from that.
And he's attributing his wins to the elite points. Was he being quite liberal with those at the start? Just turn 1, I'm going in heavy with these. I got 10, but I'm going to spend all 10 and try and deliver a devastating turn 1. Is that what he was doing, or how's he using them?
Yeah. So interestingly, like, I think it's very difficult to say exactly how he was using them, but one of the main things that he was doing was taking 2 troopers and dropping the demo vet quite a lot of time.
Okay.
So, and the reason then is that gave him 2 grenade caddies. So his 2 troopers would be given the frag grenade and the crack grenade, which then meant that he could be using those elite points much more liberally. Because
they come with a free one, don't they?
Yes, exactly. They come with a free one each. So he was able to then, like, throw a frag grenade and get a free elite point on each of his attacks. Which, again, like, it then meant that I'm sort of like reading into still bit, but it then meant that he could save those elite points for the weapons that, as you said, that you really want to make sure that you'd lose. And then the other point that he sort of gave as a tactical tip, whatever, we'll call it a tactical tip, is, like, making sure you assign the elite points to the correct target. So he would be willing to spend quite a lot of elite points, but it had to be on the right thing, right? So let's say he's shooting at a enemy plasma gunner. He's going to invest significantly more elite points than just, say, at a regular trooper. So I think that's an interesting point there, is, like, his kind of lesson is, don't be afraid to spend those elite points. I think he spent them quite early on, but he was also prioritizing their use really effectively to make sure that it's like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm spending against, this particular model in this instance to guarantee that kill. and avoid then taking return damage later on.
Yeah, it's the elite points is something I haven't quite got my head around the maths to understand the reliability. I can sort of understand like the probability of regular dice, but it shakes up a little bit these elite points, and I haven't quite understood it. And I'd written it off, and maybe I wrote it off too soon. So it'll be interesting to see what Brett comes up with in the future as he reflects on these and different ways to play them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, it's a little bit there about which options to switch out and try new things. Obviously,
Yeah,
I think most people would normally just say take all the specialists, but it's interesting to see that he's gone, you know what, in this instance, in this particular matchup, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to run instead an extra grenade guy to give me a bit more flex in that. So the next sort of things I asked him about was obviously, what's your tac ops and what's your equipment selection? So for tac ops, he was running primarily recon, and then he was saying he was taking a recover item and then either the plant transponder or secure vantage. So plant transponder is an interesting one because I wouldn't have thought that would be particularly good, but clearly he thinks there's some mileage in that, and I assume the ability to shift APL around the team is pretty useful for it. And potentially as well, there's an element of the maps being favourable to do that as well. But the recon is really no surprise. He did say that he would flex into Seek and Destroy as well if it was relevant, and would take things like assassinate, target, and eliminate guards. So I think that those are probably the strongest archetypes to go for, and that's kind of what he was doing most of the time. And obviously the Kasarkin have a really strong faction tac op, just basically choose an objective and go grab it. So I think he was always taking that, which is pretty interesting. And then finally, I asked about the equipment selection. And I said he took the frag and the crack grenade, which again makes perfect sense. Somewhat unsurprisingly, he was taking an adrenaline shot on the medic and the gunner model that he was going to then pair up with that medic, which is something I touched on in the previous podcast about using that experimental ability to ignore APL modifiers. That's exactly what this can do. So your medic can be reviving someone and then ignore the punishment the next turn of having done so. And the gunner can also ignore the punishment of having just been revived. And then also he would then be using a long-range scope on either the hotshot volley gunner or the sniper as well, which is I guess just min-maxing the benefits of getting crits with those models, just to make it even more lethal. So some really interesting lessons that have come out of that. Now, obviously, all of that Q&A, I've got it all in like long form with loads more detail of that. We'll chuck that onto the Patreon for the guys to read through slow time because we've obviously just blitzed through it now. But I just thought it'd be really interesting just to capture like a different point of view from what most people talk about when it comes to Kasarkin and think, they're a trash tier team, whatever. Well, actually, maybe not. Someone has taken them pretty far, losing only to two of the top players with meta factions, I would say. Once again, when we talk about tier lists, we talk about just how narrow the gap is between the top and the bottom. It really is there. But I think I would be really interested to see Brett play like a meta team, like see him with either Breaches or Pathfinders or Star Striders, something like that, and just see what he could do with them. Because if he's doing that well, in my mind, with Kasarkin, I think he's got a lot of player potential to go forth and do a whole lot more as well.
Speaking of seeing Brett play, you can see him play, can't you? Because he's not starting up a YouTube channel people can get on. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So they've just begun. They're called Six Sided Legion. So if you hit up on YouTube, Six Sided Legion, they're a new channel, and they're starting to put some videos out there about sort of their game reviews and highlights and that sort of stuff. So I recommend you go over there, give it a watch, give it a like, give it a subscribe, and maybe you can get those questions that you have about Kasarkin directly to the guy that was running them on the day, and he can give you a far more detailed answer than we have here. But I'm pretty sure he's off to the KTO, which is happening in a few weeks in February. So yeah, hopefully he's going to take his Kasarkin again, and maybe we'll see another high placement and potentially some more lessons learned out of that as well. So that could be really interesting. As I said, Six Sided Legion is their YouTube. So go have a look at that and let us know what you think. But it's awesome to see someone taking a slightly different turn with the standard meta.
Yeah, it's cool. So the LVO also isn't just a exciting venue; it also represents the end of the ITC season, doesn't it? Do we know what impact it's had to the scores?
Yeah, absolutely. So it did have quite a bit of a shake up. So Obviously, the ITC season is pretty much run from the end of January until sort of the beginning of February till the end of January every year, and the LVO is the big final event that sort of ends it, and awards are given out and all that sort of stuff. So for people that aren't too aware of what the ITC is, it's just a kind of like a league, but it's global. And every time you win a Killteam event, if you're registered on BCP with your name and email address and all that sort of stuff, and you keep it consistent throughout, it will track your individual results. So then what it does is it takes during that season, so from February until January, it will take your 5 best results over the year, and it will then collate those as a point score, and you can see where people place as a result. So obviously, more points are awarded for bigger events and more rounds and that sort of stuff. So if you have a big event with lots of rounds and lots of players, you're obviously going to get more points for placing first than you would placing, say, 5th. So it takes all that, it takes your placement and the event size, factors it in, it gives you a points value. And so that's something that we've been kind of competing towards throughout the year, and it was kind of successful for us. So as a team, Command Point UK, we managed to come first in the UK. Clearly, we were competing mainly with the likes of like the London Wargaming Guild and the old ones and that sort of stuff locally. And then as individuals, I managed to come top in the UK. So the way it works at each individual community level is it takes points that are only scored within that region, right? So out of all of the UK tournaments, whoever scored the most out of them gets the UK spot. And then globally, I managed to come 5th. I actually thought I was going to drop out of the top 5, to be honest, because LVO is so massive, and that there's people there that were going to win a whole lot of points. And I know Chris Backey got like 6th in the end, so he was just a few points behind me overall. But I thought he would have picked me into the top 5 at least. So, but you know that is a huge achievement for me, just in the sort of the first year of Killteam to manage to come out and get top 5 globally, number 1 in the UK, and our team to get number 1 as well, which is pretty cool, to be honest.
But that was the old team, because we've obviously gone through a rebranding now. We're now going to come back as Turning Point Tactics.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what's interesting for me was like we went through the year, and obviously we were Command Point UK, and we had quite a UK focus. But since starting this podcast, I've realised just we're already having a bit of a global reach, and I think it would be really foolish of us to not look across to the other communities and think, you know what, let's bring some of that talent on board. Let's try and look at how we can spread some of what we're doing, but also try and take some of those lessons and bring it into what we do. So yeah. I think the whole Command Point UK isn't really in theme with that, because we're not going to be UK focused anymore. We're going global. We're going to lay down the gauntlet, and we're going to try and challenge the Spanish scene and see if we can get some higher ITC points and maybe challenge for a top point, or at least top 5 in a team scores would be really cool for the next year. So the new team that we're going with is Turning Point Tactics, and clearly at the moment it was obviously me, you, and Mark were the sort of the core team, with guest Papa Slater turning up every now and then.
Mythical. It doesn't really
just
exist.
The mythical Slayer just coming in and taking souls. But that was the original team, but that's no more. We have a much bigger team that are coming in to join us as well. So from Hungary originally, but I think it's also currently Switzerland. But from Hungary originally, we have with Tappy and Klostri, which you guys have probably seen on Discord, and they are some incredible players that came to the London Grand Tournament. So for me, the traits that I think are really important for players to have is, you know, being good at the game is great, but also having great sportsmanship is really important as well. And I think those two guys have that, in droves, which is awesome. And then also from the Manchester scene, we have both Ben and Dan joining us. So we've gone from quite a small little group into already we've gained 4 new members, and we'll sort of, you know, we'll see how we'll start slow, and we'll grow a bit more hopefully as the year goes on. But that's pretty exciting.
Transfer window is still open.
The transfer window is very much still open. And we'll see, you know, like we don't want to try and poach all the talent across the world, but but we definitely want to try and get a bit of representation in every community, because I think that'd be really cool for us. But so we have
Ace will review your application.
yeah. But yeah, so we obviously Ben and Dan are from the Manchester scene, and they're A, that they're really good players, and B, they've grown a community from not from nothing, but from a very small amount into a huge thriving community up in the north. And the only way you can do that is by being basically great blokes and having good sportsmanship and understanding the whole fun of the game. And what I did find amusing is listening to one of our podcasts. They'd been naming themselves the aggressive northern meta from my nice. Review, which I really like. So that's really cool. That's exactly what we want. So we're bringing them on board as well, and I'm really excited. So we're all getting together, and Tappy can't make it, but the rest of us are all going to be in Warhammer World this weekend. So that's going to be pretty awesome to be able to see the whole team together at one point and see where we can go from there. So that's exactly what it's about, and I'm really excited to be going into 2023 with Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see what we can do, because I think it's the game is growing, massively growing, and there's more exciting news that we've got coming on in a second about other stuff that's happening, but it's an exciting time to be in the game, and I'm really looking forward to what 2023 is going to bring. So hopefully we can get some foreign trips in as well.
Yeah. So you touched on other exciting news there. Is that perhaps in reference to Soulshackle being announced at the LVO?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we got to see the initial video come out about Arbites and the Hand of the Archon, the Drakari, and since then they've also released a few Warhammer Plus articles and the battle report that's just come out on Warhammer Plus as well. So the interesting thing that I think for me is I didn't expect Arbites to be an 11 model team. And it looks like they're going to be 11 models with 11 activations as well. So again, immediately when we talk about the successes and that sort of thing of Kasarkin, the fact that they are 11 models, it is going to make them slightly more durable, and that extra activation is going to help make them slightly more or able to compete with the Horde teams a little bit better as well. So that's one interesting thing that I took from that. And they've also got 4/4 damage shotguns. So that's going to be really strong. And we talked about in one of the previous podcasts, 4 damage being a really nice damage breakpoint for a lot of big weapons. So that's exciting. So it'll be interesting to see how the teams are balanced out with the other teams that are currently out and to be released, because they're on paper that they're looking quite strong. The Drakari are looking similar to Corsairs. They're going to be 9 models, but they again have a little ploy that they can use just to delay their activation by 1. So potentially on turn 1, you just spend a CP, you put yourself up to effectively a 10 activation team, which is going to really help them, I think, hold against some of the bigger teams and reduce the punishment from that activation advantage early on, which should be interesting to see. Have you looked at any of the teams? Do you have a favourite or anything you're interested in?
The interesting thing to me was, in my initial assessment, is that the Drakari are the vanilla team. If I said to you before this release, black latex, cod pieces, handcuffs, doggy style, the Drakari players would be going mental. And I go, no, that's the Arbites.
It is by far the kinkiest box that we've had in a while, isn't it? Soulshackle, it's got a lot going on. I like the fact that you can. So one of the guys has a special ability where he can actually cuff a guy and stop them from moving. And obviously their team-wide ability is that they can then shoot into combat. So you can cuff a guy, pin him to the ground, and have another guy shoot him in the head with a shotgun.
Stop resisting.
So, that to me screams like Imperium Police or State Defense.
It screams grim darkness, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
I love it. Yeah.
So they got a lot of interesting tools, and my hot take just from the battle report, and I'll happily wind back on this and be corrected at a later date, but it seems like the Arbites, there's a video on that, wasn't there? Arbites. The Arbites have a big toolbox, and I think that's going to be really strong for being able to get them to do the stuff they need to do. The Drakari seem a bit more like a win more team, so they're going to get power from pain if they kill models, and that's going to give them the ability to do additional stuff. So that might be reroll dice or gain an extra APL or do a dash after combat, that sort of thing. But that obviously is relying on you getting those kills earlier on. So I'll be interested to see how it goes. But I'm not too sure if it will be which team will be better or worse. It's hard to tell from the battle report, because they're not playing it necessarily like you're playing a normal game, right? They're playing it as a showcase of abilities and that sort of stuff. So yeah, the other thing that I had noticed is that our Arbites seem to have not many AP weapons. So unless there's something hidden in there in that team, they might be struggling against some of the elites. Now, I'm not really worried about say intercession, because you've got quite a lot of 4 damage weapons. I was thinking more about like Nurgle Legionary, because if they've got -1 normal damage to those shotguns, making them damage 3, that could be quite punishing. Noting that there's probably going to be little damage coming through from crits. So
Sniper's probably going to dish out some morsels. Does the sergeant? I think the sergeant has a plasma pistol, doesn't he? I'm not sure.
I didn't see one. I think he had a shotgun and a baton,
Okay.
and I think he can have just a shield and a baton. So I didn't see a plasma pistol. That'd be really cool if he did. That might make it a bit more spicy. But what I guess my worry is, do they have that counter punch to be able to push back against some of those hard to kill models and really punish people for playing too aggressively against you? And I'm not too sure yet. Maybe they have some more gunner options we haven't seen, but we saw the Weber and we saw the heavy stubber. There seems to be some sort of auto shotgun on the sprue as well. So I'm sure there's something there, but I'm just not quite sure what it is. So yeah, well,
can they run shields as well? Maybe there's a melee opportunity there to run up and get close and just block them out and then pin them so they can't shoot back. I don't know. We'll see what the rules say, I guess.
Yeah, and it is at the moment. It is a bit of speculation. I guess the other thing that was another key takeaway is that they're going to be 7 wounds and 4 up saves. So they're not particularly tanky, but we talked about when we were assessing kill teams previously. Are they offensive? Are they defensive? And do they play the mission well? So they're offensive because they have 4 damage weapons, and they also have access to rerolls with the one of their ploys. So if you get within 4 inches of someone, you can get some rerolls, and I think that's effective in both melee and shooting. So that's going to be really good for their overall team reliability. And then defensively, they can reroll some armor saves, but they didn't show any damage negation or anything like that. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out going forwards, because that might be a weakness of the team potentially is their fragility. But with 11 models, well, maybe they'll be all right with 11 models. They'll just have enough tanks to be able to get through. And then playing the mission, well, again, it's hard to see exactly what their other faction tack-ups are going to be, but I think there's something there. They mentioned they had security. I'm sure they're going to have something like Seek and Destroy. I'll be amazed if they don't have Seek and Destroy. So I think they'll have some interesting tack ops. They've got some strong guns, and they've got an ability to survive, I guess. So on paper, with all the abilities that they've shown, I think they're going to be an interesting team. I think they can be difficult to play against because they have quite a lot of denial abilities, like being able to stop you from doing your scouting step for a CP. That could be really frustrating versus some teams. So I think there's going to be something there. We'll have to see what it is when the full team's released. As soon as they do, we'll probably do like a hot take podcast video on it, just so we can give our initial impressions once we get the full rules. I think
they can mitigate the scouting step at 1 CP. I missed that. That's cool.
Yeah, so they just turn it so whatever you chose, they pay a CP and you don't get to do it. So the people trying to put barricades on vantage points and all that sort of stuff.
Just thinking that. Sort that out.
Immediately stop that. It's against the law. And then
I
am the law, and you're not allowed to do that anymore. So no more barricades and vantages for 1 CP, which again, that's pretty strong. And I think if you can do that in a lot of matchups, that could be quite decisive. But initiative's still determined, obviously, by the selection, so you can't necessarily just be too aggressive with it. But it's a lot of teams that are heavily reliant on, say, like the infiltrate ability. So I'll be interested to see what people do with that. So it looks like they're a bit of a control team, probably going to have access to a lot of stun and that sort of stuff as well, whereas the Drakari seem a bit more outright aggressive and probably going to match that aggressive northern meta play style. To get in amongst it and
Yes,
get
yeah.
rewarded for getting kills early on. We'll see. Maybe they'll be too fragile as well, but I imagine they're going to be. It looked like they were 8 wounds and 4 up save. But the guy in the back rep, I by the way, I've never seen so many guy roll so many sixes. So
Wow.
he has he gave his team wide 6-up feel no pain. Right, I have used 6-up feel no pain, and I think I've never rolled a single 6 with it ever. Right, it's never happened. Like I played Blooded and I played the Starstriders with the Assassin. Like never once got a 6 on my feel no pain. Or if you do, it's when it's irrelevant. Right, that guy rolled probably like 30% 6s. It was gross. I felt so sorry for the Arbites player. But whatever.
He felt all the pain. Jakari felt no pain.
Exactly. Yeah. It was very Jakari-esque. But yeah, so that's some exciting news that's coming up, and we'll keep you updated as and when we get a bit more on it. But obviously, we're going to try and get the pre-orders in on Saturday, so not long till that's out. Okay, there's one other bit I think that's probably worth touching on, which obviously our plans for the weekend. So we're going off to Warhammer World up in Nottingham, which is pretty cool. As I said, the main thing about this one is that we're getting to see pretty much all of the Turning Point Tactics team together, bar one, for like the first time in the new year, start of the ITC season, and I think that's a really cool start. But what's your thoughts on what team are you hoping to take?
I'm gonna run in Crew. I don't know if it's an intelligent idea, but I love the new changes in the date slate, and I wanna try them out. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do yet. I've finished gluing and painting just in time, so they're coming. Now I've got to think up a strategy in the next few hours, so we'll think about that. But it'd be exciting to see what they do. And what's interesting is that we've just found out that we're going on the old TAC Ops and on the old rule set. So I need to bear that in mind too when we come to think about things.
Yeah,
it should be interesting.
It's quite a significant change switching to old missions and old TAC Ops, because I know a lot of people have been preparing for the new missions and the new TAC Ops. And I'm pretty sure I said at one of the practice games when I was at my local club in Nottingham that GW are usually pretty hard over on making you play the new rules. So I'm gonna have to eat my hat when I to tell them that actually they've now gone back on that and that they're not doing it. Which I understand the decision is because not everyone's been able to get access to all the TAC Ops, all the cards, all that sort of stuff.
And they wanted to try and source them, I think, to have them on the table. That didn't work for them either. So
yeah, exactly.
It's a shame.
So for whatever reason, it's fallen through, and I do get that you don't want someone to feel excluded because they don't have the right cards or anything like that, and that would be really bad. So I understand why they've done the decision. I think there's potentially some ways that they could have worked it around. We could have done maybe new missions with old TAC Ops or something like that, but it is what it is. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but clearly that's thrown a bit of a spanner in the works for my team selection. So I've been trying to figure out which team to take, and I've sort of narrowed it down between Vet Guard, Breaches, and Wormblade. Blooded are definitely out now because old Seek and Destroy is I don't want to say impossible to score, but really hard. So I've sort of got those 3 teams, and I'm leaning more towards the Vet Guard and Breaches side of stuff, because one of the most important things about this tournament, because the other big change that came out somewhat last moment, was that it's gone down to 3 rounds rather than 4, right? So tiebreakers are going to be like the most important thing for your route to victory. So you have to win all 3 games to even be within a chance of the top 8. But then everyone in the top 8 is going to be on 3 wins. So the only thing that's going to separate people is going to be tiebreakers, and the primary tiebreaker is going to be TAC Ops scored. So you need to max TAC Ops in all 3 of your games just to have a chance of really getting into that podium position. So, and then I assume after that it's going to be max VP. So you're looking really at making sure that you don't drop any points, you don't drop any TAC Ops, and you win all 3 games, which is going to be pretty tough, I think, for a lot of teams to make sure you get that level of consistency. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes, but I'm a bit concerned that there's there's an element of RNG as to who your opponents are, and I guess it always is, but and which missions you play as to which teams are going to be more or less successful, I think.
Pathfinders are there if you want them.
Well, like I went. I'm considering it because it was the last time I won at Warhammer World. Well, that was team, but like the time I won at Warhammer World, it was a 3 round tournament with Tackles being like the key placer. So and I managed to win with them, but I'm trying to be different this year. I'm trying to increase my variety. I don't want to go back to the staples. So I think I'm going to do better if I um, run with one of the other teams. I'm probably going to regret that, but we'll see how it
We'll
goes.
learn from it, though, won't we?
We'll learn from it, and that's the main thing. Like I'm sort of accepting that this might not be the one that I'm going to win. That's fine. But I'm hoping that we can, by taking a new team, I can learn a whole bunch of lessons, and hopefully share that with the community, as I said, and we'll see what we get out of it. And if I do win, then you know what, hooray, all the better. But clearly that's not the focus of this event, because it's going to be slightly skewed about what the lessons are about the current meta, because clearly we're talking about what the current teams do with the old missions and the old maps, which isn't quite what people are going to be seeing on their tables in future. I don't think so. Yeah, but it's exciting times, and obviously, just going to Warhammer World is a pretty epic experience, right? Like, it's a fantastic place to play. The staff are super friendly and engaging, and you get to see all your mates in one place. So you can't ask too much more than that. And hopefully we'll get some good catch up and maybe a few drinks afterwards at some point with some of the guys. But
be a good weekend, won't it?
And if you are there and you're hearing this and you want to come say hello, then please do. We are just as friendly in real life as we are on here. I promise. Maybe not Connor. It depends if he's eating or not. But we'll see how it goes. Cool. I think that's pretty much everything I had for this episode, because obviously still a bit jet lagged. Just come back from the US, and I'm still on massive admin catch up. But was there anything else that you wanted to throw in there, Connor, or anything you wanted to cover off?
No, I think we covered it. Thank you.
Sweet. As I said, that's going to bring us to the end of this episode, but hopefully you did find something new or useful while listening, particularly in that Kasarkin segment, listening to a bit about what Brett had to say. And as I said, if you want to hear a bit more about that is going to be available in much more detail on the Patreon for all of the guys that are supporting us over there. If you want to make sure that you get our content on time and all that sort of stuff, then please make sure you hit that subscribe button and get notifications. It massively helps a small channel like us just by hitting subscribe to get us a bit more highly ranked on YouTube. As I said, if you can't wait and you want early access, we do have a Patreon where you can get exclusive access to all this content ahead of time. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. So drop us a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Ryan. This has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.